In the first chapters, we follow the rise of Zheng from a powerless hostage child to the ruler of a united empire. Born in Handan in 259 BCE, Zheng grew up surrounded by people who hated Qin. After his father escaped, he and his mother were left behind and forced into hiding. He later returned to Qin, inherited the throne at 13, and gradually removed those who controlled him. After defeating Lao Ai's rebellion, the young king became the true master of Qin. He then turned Qin's powerful military system against the 6 remaining kingdoms. He survived Jingke's assassination attempt, corrected his costly mistake in the war against Chu, and continued the conquest. By 221 BCE, all 6 kingdoms had fallen. At 39, Zheng created a new title for himself, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. He wanted the world to have only one answer. One of the first great debates after unification decided what kind of empire this would become. Chancellor Wang argued that Yan, Qi, and Chu were too far from the capital. The emperor should send his sons to rule them as hereditary kings, following a system used for centuries by the earlier Zhou dynasty. Many ministers agreed. Li Si did not. He reminded the emperor that the Zhou rulers had also granted territory to their brothers and sons. But after several generations, blood ties weakened. Relatives became enemies, regional rulers fought one another, and the Zhou kings lost control. If Qin destroyed 6 kingdoms only to create new hereditary kingdoms on the same land, then unification would simply prepare the next age of war. The first emperor accepted Li Si's argument. The empire was divided into administrative districts and counties. Local officials could not pass their positions to their sons. They could not turn land or armies into family property. They were appointed by the central government and could be transferred, removed, or punished. No one outside the emperor's household would be allowed to build an independent kingdom that could survive for generations. Then the first emperor began removing the differences left by the old states. Before unification, written forms, coins, measurements, and even the distance between wagon wheels could vary from one kingdom to another. The empire standardized them all. Roads spread outward from Xianyang, carrying documents, soldiers, grain, and commands. Merchants no longer had to change money at every old border, and officials could read documents from distant regions. Lands that had once treated one another as foreign were forced to operate by the same rules. The changes made the empire easier to govern. They also allowed the emperor's reach to extend farther than that of any earlier king. In the north, General Meng Tian fought the Xiongnu, a powerful nomadic confederation, and linked older frontier walls into a larger defensive line. In the far south, Qin armies entered Lingnan and helped open the Lingxiu Canal between 2 major river systems. Roads, palaces, frontier defenses, and the enormous tomb complex begun when Zheng was 13 consumed grain, timber, metal, and human labor. The first emperor also traveled constantly through his new empire. His procession crossed the former kingdoms, climbed sacred mountains, and carved inscriptions praising unification. He wanted everyone to see that the old kings were gone. There was now only the emperor. But the farther he traveled, the more he discovered that the 6 kingdoms were not truly dead. In 218 BCE, voices that challenged him. In 213 BCE, a debate broke out at a palace banquet. One scholar praised the new administrative system for ending the wars among hereditary kingdoms. Another warned that the emperor had given no regional kingdoms to his sons. If the central government were ever seized, the imperial family would have no powerful allies in the provinces. It could have remained a debate about the future of the state. Li Si turned it into a debate about who had the right to judge the emperor. He warned that scholars were using examples from the past to attack the present. As long as private teachers could appeal to older political models, people would continue to hear competing ideas about what government should be. An order to burn books followed. With exceptions for works on medicine, farming, divination, and the history of Qin, many privately owned classical and philosophical texts had to be surrendered and destroyed. Anyone who wanted to study the law was expected to learn from government officials. Fires burned across the empire. The first emperor had standardized writing. The emperor's eldest son, Fusu, objected. The empire had only recently been united, he warned. People in distant regions were still unsettled. Excessive punishment would make them more afraid, not more loyal. The first emperor rejected the warning and sent Fusu north to serve with General Meng Tian. The man most likely to inherit the empire was removed from the center of power. In 211 BCE, a meteorite fell in Dong Commandery. Someone carved 7 Chinese characters into the stone. The first emperor will die, and the land will be divided. An investigation began. No one confessed. The people living nearby were punished, and the stone was destroyed. The prophecy disappeared, but its message could not be so easily erased. The emperor could burn a book, smash a stone, and kill the person who spoke a prediction. How could he kill death itself? Years earlier, in 219 BCE, a seeker named Su Fu had told him that 3 islands of immortals lay somewhere in the eastern sea. On Penglai, Fangzhang, and Yingzhou, he said, immortal beings possessed a medicine that could prevent death. The first emperor gave Su Fu ships and supplies and sent him into the eastern sea with several thousand young men and women. Years passed, but no elixir arrived. When Su Fu appeared again, he offered an explanation. Giant creatures in the sea were blocking the ships, he said. Skilled crossbowmen would have to kill them before the expedition could reach the islands of immortals. During his final eastern tour in 210 BCE, the first emperor took armed men to the coast and personally fired at a great fish. The man who had destroyed 6 kingdoms still believed that every obstacle could be identified, attacked, and removed. Even death. Su Fu sailed east again. This time, his fleet never returned. A much stranger legend grew in later centuries. It claimed that Su Fu carried not only young people, but also craftsmen, seeds, farming tools, and enough supplies to establish a new settlement. Perhaps they were never truly searching for an elixir. Perhaps they crossed the sea, reached the islands of Japan, and chose to remain there. More than 2,000 years later, several places in Japan still preserve stories about Su Fu's arrival, settlement, and death. Some have sites identified as his tomb. Some honor him at shrines. Local traditions even credit his followers with bringing new knowledge of farming, fishing, weaving, and papermaking. If Su Fu really reached Japan with thousands of young settlers, sailors, and craftsmen, and if their descendants continued to multiply and blend with the local population, then a bold question appears. Could the Japanese people as a whole be descendants of that lost Qin expedition? History offers no answer. At the same time, specialists at court continued preparing medicines meant to extend his life. Later generations suspected that some of these compounds contained mercury or other toxic substances. We cannot know whether they directly caused his death. But the irony remains, every pill he swallowed in search of longer life may have brought death a little closer. The first emperor had taken control of land, roads, writing, currency, and law. Now he was trying to take control of time. Then, on the road to immortality, his body failed. He won the world, and lost to a carriage. In 210 BCE, the first emperor began his 5th great tour. Traveling with him were Chancellor Li Si, the palace official Zhao Gao, and the emperor's favored younger son, Hu Hai. His eldest son, Fusu, remained in the north with Meng Tian and the empire's most important frontier army. The procession traveled east along the Yangtze, then north along the coast. The journey was long, and the summer grew hotter. Near Pingyuan Ford, the first emperor became seriously ill. No one dared to ask what would happen if he died or who would succeed him. The records of the grand historian preserves a disturbing detail: the first emperor hated to hear people speak about death. Because of that, his ministers were afraid to raise the subject. He had designed an empire that was supposed to last for 10,000 generations, yet he had not publicly declared who would rule after him. As his condition worsened, he finally ordered a sealed letter to be sent to Fusu in the north. Its most important instruction was simple. Return to Xianyang and join the funeral. The letter did not explicitly appoint Fusu as emperor. But among all the imperial sons, he alone was being called back to the capital. The letter was placed in the hands of Zhao Gao. It was never delivered. The procession reached Shaqiu, the sand dune platform. In July, the first emperor died at 49. He had become king at 13, taken personal control at 22, and conquered the last rival kingdom at 39. He lived as emperor for only 11 years. Li Si's first decision was not to announce the death. The emperor had died far from Xianyang. The former kingdoms remained restless, no successor had been confirmed, and Fusu and Meng Tian controlled powerful forces in the north. If the news spread too early, the empire might break apart. So the doors of the imperial carriage remained closed. Meals were carried inside. Reports were submitted. Commands continued to come out. While alive, the first emperor had turned the state into a machine trained to obey a single voice. Now, to keep the machine moving, the men around him had to pretend that voice still existed. And once the death was hidden, real power passed to the people who could manufacture the dead emperor's commands. Zhao Gao approached Hu Hai. Hu Hai was the emperor's favored younger son and was already traveling with the procession. If Fusu returned to Xianyang, Hu Hai would lose any chance of taking the throne. Zhao Gao told him that the future of the empire was within reach. Then he approached Li Si. Li Si had helped build the centralized empire and was now its highest minister. Zhao Gao asked him one question. If Fusu became emperor and Meng Tian returned to court, would Li Si remain chancellor? Li Si fell silent. He had spent his life defending imperial law and order. Fear of losing his position now led him to forge the emperor's command. The three men made a secret agreement. They suppressed the first emperor's letter to Fusu and created new orders declaring Hu Hai the heir. Then they wrote another command in the dead emperor's name, accusing Fusu and Meng Tian of failure and ordering them to take their own lives. When the order reached the northern frontier, Meng Tian was immediately suspicious. The emperor had trusted them with a huge army. Why would he suddenly demand their deaths without an investigation? Meng Tian urged Fusu to seek confirmation. Fusu believed that a son could not refuse a direct command from his father. He drew his sword and killed himself. For years, the first emperor had taught the realm that a document bearing the imperial seal could not be questioned. Now a forged document used that obedience to kill the man most likely to inherit the empire. The procession continued west through the summer heat. The body decayed. Carts of salted fish were moved beside the emperor's carriage. Along the road, officials and ordinary people knelt before a ruler who had become a hidden corpse. Only after the procession returned to Xianyang was the death officially announced. Hu Hai became the second emperor. He inherited all of his father's power but little of his ability. He continued the enormous construction projects and labor demands. With Zhao Gao's help, he also eliminated brothers, sisters, and ministers who might threaten him. In 209 BCE, two minor officers named Chen Sheng and Wu Guang were leading conscripted men toward the frontier when heavy rain delayed them. Under the traditional account of Qin law, arriving late could mean death. If obedience might kill them and rebellion might also kill them, why not rebel? They killed their commanders, raised a flag, and shouted a line remembered for more than 2,000 years. Are kings, generals, and ministers born different from the rest of us? The revolt spread like fire through dry grass. Names that had disappeared from the map, Zhao, Wei, Qi, and Chu, returned on rebel banners. The first emperor had destroyed the old kingdoms, but they had survived inside people's memories. Reports of rebellion reached the palace. Hu Hai did not want to hear them. Messengers who described the danger risked punishment. Later messengers learned to give him safer news. The rebels were only bandits. Local officials would destroy them soon. The bad news had not disappeared. It had simply stopped entering the palace. Zhao Gao eventually forced Hu Hai to take his own life. His successor, Ziying, soon surrendered to the army entering the Qin heartland. The first emperor had imagined a second emperor, a third, and then 10,000 generations. In reality, the second was the last true emperor of Qin. Only about 15 years passed between unification in 221 BCE and the dynasty's fall. After the first emperor's death, his empire survived for roughly 3 years. But the first emperor himself did not entirely disappear. His body was carried to the enormous mausoleum at the foot of Mount Li, a project that had been under construction for nearly 40 years. The records of the grand historian describes an underground palace with mercury rivers and seas, a ceiling like the night sky, and automatic crossbows aimed at intruders. Legend also speaks of lamps filled with merman oil, burning inside a miniature underground empire. More than 2,000 years later, the terracotta army and bronze chariots have returned to the light. But the central burial chamber remains unopened. No one knows what condition the emperor's body may be in. No one knows how much of the ancient description is real and how much belongs to the imagination that has grown around the sealed tomb. Above ground, thousands of clay soldiers still face east. That was the direction of the kingdoms Qin conquered. It was also the direction in which Su Fu's fleet disappeared. The first emperor wanted 500 years. Heaven gave him 11 years as emperor. He wanted Qin to last for 10,000 generations. It collapsed under the second emperor. Yet the title of emperor, the centrally appointed administration, and the drive to standardize writing and measurement were inherited by later dynasties for centuries. His body did not become immortal. Some of his rules did. And across the sea lies an even bolder possibility. If Su Fu and thousands of followers truly settled in Japan, if their descendants multiplied and blended into the local population, and if they eventually became part of the ancestry of the Japanese people, perhaps even one of the distant roots of the entire nation, then the immortality Qin Shi Huang searched for may never have been inside an alchemist's furnace, a mercury pill, or a sealed tomb. It may have been carried away by a fleet that never returned. One man sealed himself underground and left behind 8,000 soldiers who never age. Another disappeared across the sea and may have left his bloodline inside a new nation. More than 2,000 years later, the tomb beneath Mount Li remains closed. The Eastern Sea still offers no answer. Qin Shi Huang sent Su Fu to search for eternal life. In the end, who truly found immortality, the emperor, or the man who never came home?